Did you make one of these dehydrating mistakes and now think you've ruined everything? It's probably all okay. Hi folks, it's Darcy from the Purposeful Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, thanks for stopping by. I'm glad you're here. So today we're going to be talking about 5 mistakes that are often made by beginners that really aren't that big of a deal. They may just take a change in habit of how you dehydrate, or they may be things that you think are a mistake that really aren't. So let's get started. Okay, so our first mistake, usually a pretty big one that gets asked often in my dehydrating group, Dehydrating Tips and Tricks on Facebook. You're welcome to join us anytime. I'll have a link down in the description box below. Is somebody is using a dehydrator that has a time feature on it, and it runs out overnight because they don't think ahead kind of about how long they have to dehydrate, so they're setting it exactly what the book says should take, which we all know never is right for most people. It's always going to be adjusted to your humidity in your home, the kind of machine you have. There are so many factors that play into it. Just use those times as a window. Usually you need more time. And then the dehydrator stops in there. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. They don't get up till 7, and their food has been sitting there in the dehydrator overnight unattended. Now, safe dehydrating is process for that is that you don't leave food in your dehydrator for an extended amount of time when the machine is not running, especially when you're talking about raw food. The food's not fully dry yet, mostly because you run the risk of airborne bacteria and mold settling on your food when there's no air to disturb it, and then when you go back to finish it, those things are in your food, which could cause problems down the road. Then you have problems with fully dehydrated food that maybe your food was finished and the timer went off and you're not going to get up for a few more hours. For that food, you are able to reabsorb moisture that's in your air. The food reabsorbs that while it's just sitting there, so it's not fully dry by the time you get up. Now, in both of these cases, it's fine. Okay, don't worry about it. If your machine turned off or if the electricity went off in your home, don't worry. It's not that it's a one-time issue, and the likelihood that anything like that's going to happen that will make you sick is so minuscule that it doesn't matter. What you don't want to do is to get into the habit of leaving raw food in your machine overnight all the time, because that's not a safe food handling habit to be in. So if you're trying to set your timer, but you don't want to run it hot overnight because you're afraid you're going to over dry the things, and for the most part, you can't over dry anything. I'll leave a video, which side I always forget. You'd think I know by now. I'll leave a little iCard above, wherever it shows up, to a video that I did on over drying with dehydrated food. Just do this. Before you go to bed, just reset the timer. Set it up so that you know it's going to go all night. And if you're worried about over drying, turn your temperature down as far as it goes and just let it chill at a lower temperature. It's not going to hurt anything. Now, if your food is fully dry and you happen to leave it, you forgot about it or whatever, just turn your machine back on and let it run for a few hours to make sure that whatever humidity it may have absorbed, that it removes that. Then go through your conditioning and your proper storage. That's all you have to do. So your machine turning off when you're not done is not a problem. Just don't make it a habit. I alluded to this in the last question, but using the dehydrator at the wrong temperature. Maybe your dehydrator only has one temperature and it's always 150 all the time. Or you think that you set it, I forgot to set it at the right temperature of 135 for fruit, and it was low and it was only 95. Did I hurt anything? Like I said before, temperature matters for proteins because you want to keep them at a proper temperature to make sure that you don't run the risk of salmonella or other kind of bacterial things happening with meat and proteins that you might have in your dehydrator. Those need to be at that temperature. And if something happens and it dropped, or somebody hit a button or accidentally turned the dial and it didn't do it at that temperature and it ran for too long like that, the best course of action is to then, when you're finished drying it, go ahead and get it back up to the temperature dry, and then put it in your oven to run at 250 degrees for about 15 minutes. What you're doing is blasting it. So basically you're kind of cooking it at the very end to make sure you get it up to temperature and that it kills whatever salmonella or other bacterial issues are in that protein before you get ready to eat it. But I would say if you've left your meat in your dehydrator for an extended amount of time and it's been running at too low of a temperature, I wouldn't eat it because I've had food poisoning before. I don't ever want to have that again. It was bad. And so I would prefer that if something happened, that you just have to write that off. But that's up to you, your home, your responsibility. Okay? But what happens if you do other foods at too low of a temperature? It doesn't matter. The temperatures recommended in books are based off not just off this, but this is a good one. The National Center for Home Food Preservation is the place that has tested these recipes to make sure that the temperature is the best that it can be to dry the fastest and then keep the most nutrients. So it's that perfect temperature to be able to do both well. However, when you drop the temperature, all that's happening is that you're taking longer to dry it. So the efficiency for drying time is lessened, but you keep more nutrients, you keep more color, you run less risk of maybe over drying something that you really don't want hard and crisp. For whatever reason, you just want to keep more of it. So running a temperature lower is fine, except for proteins, okay? So if you didn't get the temperature right, it's okay. Now, if you have a one temperature machine that runs hot all the time, all that means is that for the most part, you're gonna lose a little bit more nutrients. And so you're gonna lose more of the A and C, the vitamins A and C, and some other ones that are more susceptible to the heat. It's not gonna kill it, okay? So you're gonna be fine. If that's all you've got, then that's what you've got. Dry your food, put it away. The only thing that you really have to worry about at that point is case hardening. So case hardening is when you have something, usually something like a berry that's all encompassed, okay, that you have this, or a pea would be a better idea because we don't tend to open up a pea to dry like we would berries. So if you have something like a pea or even, carrots or anything, case hardening is when the outside dries so fast and forms a shell that moisture cannot get out from the inside. And then you think it's dry and then you go to put it away and it forms mold. And you're like, but it was completely dry. Well, the thing is that the shell formed on the outside from overheat and then the inside couldn't dry out. Now, it's pretty rare that it happens, and it's usually with things that you dry way too hot. Like if you're doing it in the oven, that's the bigger problem. Or that you didn't break the skin on berries or something. So your 150 machine isn't typically gonna ever have that problem, okay? So just know that it's fine to dry at 150 if you only have that one temp, and it's really okay. Just use what you've got, put food away for your family, and enjoy the process. Now, if you're ready to upgrade and you want to get away from that one temp machine because you want to be able to do more, then I've got some recommendations for you. I'll leave a link down in the description box below of machines in different price points and their benefits that you might want to look at to help you choose a machine that you might like to have a little more control over, okay? The third mistake that people often make, using oil in your dehydrating. It's okay. Here's why. When you're dehydrating things like kale chips and you use a little oil on them in order to make a crispier chip that has a little more flavor, that's fine. I mean, that's recommended for a lot of things. Using a little spray oil on a sheet to help your fruit leather not stick, that's fine. The problem for oils is long-term storage. Oils can go rancid over time, especially after they've been heated. So that if you make a dish that has oil or a fat in it and you dehydrate it like jerky and then you want to put it on the shelf for long-term storage, you might open that up one day and it smells horrible because the oil inside has turned rancid. So the thing about oil, it's fine to use for short-term snacking. So if you want to use a little oil in your jerky marinade, if you want to use a little oil to spray on vegetable chips before you dry them to snack on, if you want to do olives, those kind of things, you can dry those. Just know that you probably should store them in the freezer if you want to store them for an extended amount of time, if you're not going to snack on them in the immediate future. Okay, that's what goes with backpacking meals too. You can dehydrate a ton of things that typically you're told not to dehydrate in general that are okay to do for short term because you can make it, you can store it in the freezer, you can take it out to get ready for your backpacking or camping trip. You've got a couple of weeks to be able to use that and it's fine. Then you don't have to worry. But oils that you plan on putting something dehydrated on a shelf by itself for 6 months to a year, you shouldn't use oil in. But if you did, just tuck it away in the freezer. It'll be fine. Number 4, you didn't blanch. So there's a list of things that should be blanched and then things that you don't have to worry about blanching. There are some things that kind of fall between. You can do it either or. So one of the things that I see often in our dehydrating group is somebody has done carrots, let's say, and over time those carrots start to change color, and they're like, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? And come to find out they didn't blanch their carrots beforehand. Now what happens is that with blanching, you've stopped the enzymatic process that makes foods degrade. And so there are some foods that you want to blanch or fully cook before you dehydrate to make them better when you store them for long term. They keep the color, they keep more of their nutrients, or you make some of the nutrients better accessible to absorb into your body, and they may have a better texture at the end and will rehydrate and cook better if they've been blanched ahead of time. I will leave a list of that down below so that you can go print off that sheet. There's also a video I'll link up in the cards that I talked about in our December series for new dehydrators. But blanching, for the most part, if you didn't do it for most foods, it's fine. You know, you're going to have some change in color. It may take you longer to rehydrate it and to cook it when you're done to get the texture that you like. Some things just don't have the same texture when they're blanched, but you didn't ruin it by not blanching it. You just made it not as good, but don't throw it away just because it happened. If you don't like the texture when you try some of it, just powder it. I'll leave, there's another video that I just did last week, I think it was, or 2 weeks ago, about ways to reuse things that may not have been the best project for you, but just use it, okay? Just know that you want to try that again. You want to push that to the front of your pantry and go through it faster than putting it back for storage later. The problem that does come with not blanching certain foods, like potatoes, is that if you don't blanch potatoes or cook them in some fashion before you dehydrate them, they probably will turn black. And it doesn't mean that the potato is bad, it just means it looks really awful, but it still is edible if you want to hide it in something like a stew. But it's definitely not something that is eye-catching. Okay, it looks really awful. So potatoes should be blanched. Most root vegetables should be at least blanched, if not fully cooked. Then there's like some other foods like that need to be blanched ahead of time. But if you didn't, it's okay. All right, just take a deep breath. It's fine. Just know it may take a little longer to dehydrate and to cook when you're done. The texture may not be exactly what you want, or it may start changing color over time. Okay, but it's fine. The fifth mistake that I often see is I've dehydrated my lemons and now they are dark. What's wrong? What did I do wrong? Why did this happen? That's actually probably not a mistake. And with some other things, like we talked about just a minute ago with potatoes, that's a mistake because blanching should be done, but it's, you can save it if you want to. And with other things, they may change color, like with carrots, they start getting really dark. Actually with carrots, they get light because they start losing all that beta carotene, and the orange sort of disappears and they get really light colored. But for the most part, that's dealt with either, you didn't blanch ahead of time and it's fine. It's, don't make it a habit. All right, but when food turns dark when you're dehydrating it, normally, other than potatoes, normally that's because you dried it at too high of a temperature for that fruit. Now, it doesn't mean that you did it wrong. It means that that's what you were told to do in a book. The books often don't talk about the fact that while, yes, lemons are a fruit and should be dehydrated at 135 because that's the temperature that fruit should be dehydrated at, for some fruits, the sugars in them, the way the naturally occurring sugars happen, when they get hot, they get dark. So for things like lemons and strawberries and some of those fruits, we actually recommend turning down the temperature a little bit. So to do it at 125 or lower so that you can still dry your fruit, but the sugars don't get so brown, and you can keep more of a true color. Now you can turn it all the way down to 95 and that you're not going to have any color changing that way, but it will take a very long time to dry. So I usually recommend between 125 and 115 to drop it there and then start experimenting for yourself. If you drop it lower to keep it even brighter, how long it takes, if that's worth the time that it takes for you to dry it at that point, okay? Because it can take up to 3, 4, 5, 6 days, depending on what that temperature is when you drop it down really low, because there's a lot of moisture to be removed from those fruits. So If your food turns dark, like your strawberries or your lemons, citrus, and other citrus, oranges, limes, grapefruit, whatever you like to do, those things should turn down a little bit. Don't use the 135 temperature, drop it down to 125 or below, and give yourself a little extra time to dry them. And your fruits probably will not turn dark. Or if they turn dark, they won't turn as dark. And then you just learn the next time, just drop it a little more, take a little more time, and just be patient. Some of these things you should look at as, yeah, maybe I did make a mistake on that thing, but I learned a lesson that how to do it better the next time. Because if you make a mistake and the things don't work well and you end up having to throw it out, that's a lesson learned to help you do better next time, to be able to preserve your food better for down the road. Okay, so don't ever look at it as that was a complete waste of time. It wasn't. Yeah, you might have wasted a little food and a little money, but you've learned so that the next time you can do better. Down in the comments below, if you have a thing that you've done that you think might have been a mistake, that you think that you wasted, that you messed something up, leave a comment and I'll answer all the questions. And if you need other suggestions for videos to watch, you can watch this one here and this one here, and those will help you along your journey of learning how to dehydrate, to fill your pantry with foods that your family already loves. So until next time, happy dehydrating.